We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, the Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundaries. We believe in cultivating curiosity and transformation that is rooted in profound love.
For over 85 years, the ministries of the Church of the Larger Fellowship have circled the globe and crossed the walls of prisons. We are a spiritual lifeline for our over 2,000 members in prison, who are also connected to individual Unitarian Universalists through our letter writing ministry.
In our online community, we offer weekly worship, classes, and groups. Our monthly magazine, Quest, supports the spiritual lives of thousands around the globe. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance.
We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship.
We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of the Voices of Unitarian Universalism, known affectionately as The View.
The View is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective.
Since 2013, we have gathered every Thursday from September to June to welcome guests from around the world.
Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond.
We hope that today's show inspires you. We hope it builds your faith and gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life.
Welcome to The View.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Voices of Unitarian Universalism. I am Reverend D.C. Fortune, and I am coming to you live from Auburn, Maine, where I serve the First Universalist Church of Auburn on the banks of the Androscoggin River, so named for the original inhabitants when white people showed up and tried to wreck things. We have an amazing guest today. I'm so very excited. But first we have to do the go around and introduce stuff. So Michael, how are things where you are?
Greetings, beloveds. Reverend Dr. Michael Tino, half of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship here, coming to you from beautiful Little Rock, Arkansas, from the dining room of my in-laws' house, the land of the Quapaw people. Where it is cloudy but warm, and the things are blooming, and the trees are doing things that I did not consent to happen around me. And I have taken Zyrtec and Flonase, and life is okay. Dante Hilliard, how are you? Oh, Dante says one second.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening, wherever you are viewing with or listening with us. I'm the Reverend Dante Hilliard, and I am here in the land of the Council of Three Fires, made up of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi people, or also known as one of my favorite cities in the entire United States, Chicago, Illinois. And, we're having this interesting weather, remember you was like March comes in like a lion, out like a lamb. I don't know, it was like all Alice in Wonderland upside downy. So I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we're in the hinterlands of space where you're not sure what's north, south, east, or west. But hey,
aren't you getting snow? Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I hope not, but it's Chicago, so
anything can happen in Chicago.
Anything can happen. As Prince says, sometimes it snows in April. But so we'll see. But because I love this city, it doesn't matter what the weather is. So yeah, good to be here.
Awesome. Darby is checking in from Southeast Texas, where she's battling allergies too. I guess it's cedar fever season there in Southeast Texas. It was just starting when I was there a couple of weeks ago. And probably the the air is yellow, and the
Oh, yeah.
cars are
I'm
yellow,
from
and the
Southeast.
driveways are yellow. I remember that all too well from my time in the Southeast.
Oof. Well, here in Maine, we got over the weekend. I was menaced by a mosquito in my garage, which was very, it's
That's an
that sort
early
of it's the
mosquito.
first one, so it's sort of an exciting thing. But you're like, I don't actually want to be near you, you little rat bastard. And then today I got up and it was like 34 degrees. So
So that mosquito is dead.
yeah, absolutely, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. All God's creatures can be somebody else's lunch. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So we have this guest, and this is sort of like we had empty dates, and I'm like, I know some interesting people on the internet. Let me see if I can get them to come on and talk to us. And so one of my favorite content creators is Rosie, who is the North Omaha Cat Lady, who just has a delightful commentary on the state of the world and politics and life. And I'm just delighted to have her here. Rosie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on in North Omaha, if you would.
Well, it's rather rainy here today. For me, I grew up in Omaha. Grew up very conservative, Republican, and Christian, and I'm neither anymore. I moved out like most Gen Xers when I was 18 and lived several different places. New York City, Chicago, Tulsa, Oklahoma, back to Minneapolis. I stayed in Minneapolis for almost 30 years. And then in 2012, I had a very, let's say, profound life lesson, and I took it to heart, and I realized that the one thing I don't have is time. And my mother was in her upper 80s, and I thought, I don't have time to spend. I don't. And so I packed up everything that I owned. I quit my job and I moved back to Omaha.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I got 5 years with her, which was great.
What a blessing. I presume a blessing.
Yeah, it's very much. And then in 2020, when all the shit hit the fan with COVID, quite honestly, like, oh my God, Facebook was an absolute dumpster fire of anti-vaxxers. And I was like, and I saw a lady on CNN named Mary Jo Lopp who was planning to mess up the Tulsa rally for Tinky Winky, our president. And I thought, that sounds like fun. And I joined TikTok. And that was my introduction into the big part of social media. And it's been a wild ride. So, yeah. So it was June of 2020 is when I joined and started making videos.
Wow. It's just been a delight. And Tinky Winky is among the most polite that I've heard Rosie come up with for that orange shit given in the White House.
Well, when he was first elected, I was like, I'm not going to call him president. So that was way back in 26. I started making up names for him on Facebook.
Sure.
And I started getting blocked, of course, by my family. And I said, why? And they said, well, we thought you'd come around. And I'm like, you don't know me very well. I was like, no. Yeah, come around. Oh, I'm going to support him. Oh, you've got to be kidding. Yeah, no. So
I pretty much stuck with the hate pumpkin.
Oh, I make up lots of rather alliterative names for him. So whatever pops out, pops out.
Yes. I had a friend who had a small child in 16 who referred to him as the shouty carrot.
That's awesome.
So one of the reasons that I asked Rosie is because a lot of what we talk about here is deconstructing white supremacy culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so here is this woman, this Gen X woman with purple hair who lives in North Omaha and tends to this little random batch of feral cats, who also does amazing work with content creators of color to work on deconstructing white supremacy stuff. And that's just like, so many people say, well, I don't know how, or I'm not near anybody, or I don't know what to do. See, right? And you're like,
you have access to the internet.
We did. We had what, encyclopedias if we were lucky at home, or we would
Yes.
see that strange alien place called a library.
Right. I had to get on a bus to go to the library to visit an encyclopedia. So
I was doing research papers when I was using still the card catalog.
Yes.
And I mean, in the 70s and 80s, they said, oh, people are stupid because they don't have access to information. And it was harder to access. Well, now if you're on Facebook, you have access to the internet. And
we discovered that people are just stupid.
It's not just that. It's like in Hood Feminism, one of my favorite quotes is, she says, with all the resources available to you, you chose ignorance. It's willful ignorance.
yes,
Because you can learn to speak Chinese for free on YouTube.
yeah,
Like, it's up to you. And as adults, we're supposed to educate ourselves. If you're not learning anything, something's wrong.
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Well, we've lost sense of like what gives authority to information, I think, which, like you talked about anti-vaxxers, and I'm like, people convince themselves that they're scientists, and I have a PhD in cell biology and studied immunology in graduate school, right? So I think I probably know a little bit more about immunology than most people.
Yeah.
And I still don't consider myself an expert on vaccines.
Right.
And people are like out there going, "Oh, the blobbity blibbity blue," and I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
Well, in my former life, I was taught at the university, both in the classroom and doing co-curricular programming, and those first couple years of teaching were very painful because I too am an Xer. And I showed up as a new teacher. We're all adults, and I'm going to treat you as such, and we're going to learn together.
How'd that go?
They whooped my ass. Those kids ran me ragged because if you have what I discovered, Bell Hooks is kind of like she doesn't know that she's my mentor, but she is like, well, she does now. She's an ancestor, so she's heard me call her name. But I started reading all the stuff about pedagogy, and I realized, oh well, just be like, hey, you're free and you're adult. Well, if no one has ever prepared you for that structure, that's not helpful. And I think as Xers, like when we laugh about card catalog, that foreign place called the library and encyclopedias, I think we were being socialized what good information is. We understand not just where to find information, but the different types of information and what would count it as, So I just think that we probably use the interweb way more savvy than the generations behind us because we had a different skill set and we had more imaginative play, so we also are better creative problem solvers because
Yeah.
Well, also we were left on our own, and if we didn't solve it, it didn't happen.
Right. Figured out. Well, and people get mad at me because they'll ask me, I'm sorry, there are dumb questions. And there are dumb questions. And my first response for a lot of them are, did you Google it? Because my mother was a teacher. And I would come to her with something and a question. And she said, did you look it up in the dictionary? Or did you look? We had a set of encyclopedias.
Yep.
Well, okay. So did you look it up first? So that, and working in education, if you're looking it up yourself, you're creating a pathway in your brain.
Yeah.
I can spoon feed it to you and it'll probably go in one ear, out the other, and you won't remember it in 20 minutes.
That was definitely a ritual in my house too. Don't ask something that you have access to the answer first. You go there first. If you're still lost or confused, then you can come. But yeah,
Right.
then you have to stand there. No, be like, well,
Right.
Well,
And I've had people tell me that I had to Google it for them. I'm like, you can't afford me as a research assistant.
okay. So for all the petty people out there, I learned this a couple years ago. Google has this backdoor website that's called "Let Me Google That For You," and when people ask you that kind of shit, you can just send them the link, and it asks you what the subject is, so you pre-type it in. So when they open the link, and go and you're like,
and it shows someone typing it.
Yes.
Oh my God.
This is the pettiest thing ever. So when you that's a way to deal with some of those less than intelligent questions.
Oh, a lot of times I make them into content. So
That is true.
Type that you typed it into TikTok, or Facebook. So let's type it into the Google.
Oh my word.
But like, even if people did Google it, and Leilani brings this up, people have lost sight of what a reliable source of information is, right? And they just believe misinformation. That's just.
We used to know that the Weekly World News and the Inquirer were toilet paper.
That's right.
Right? We understood that was just ridiculous, and we understood that well, I mean, for what it's worth, legacy media outlets at least had a better chance on like getting facts,
mm-hmm.
right? But now there's like there's no distinction between the Inquirer and the Washington Post or
Well, and don't get me started on people posting AI.
Oh Jesus!
News, I'm putting in big scare quotes.
AI is very good at doing research. I think it's very easy to pick it out. It's like, what?
Well,
it'll make up stuff if they can't find it.
If you have a sense of like a critical eye, it's easy to pick it out. And I have lots of beloveds on social media who don't have that sense, and I'm looking at you.
Well, the thing is if you do a Google search, like a lot of times now, the first thing that comes up is an AI. I just scroll past that.
Yep.
But just like when we were working with the card catalog, if you found a source and it was the Weekly World News, or it was like some little rag out of Cedar Falls, South Dakota, and you couldn't find it anywhere else, it was probably not true. So if you're only finding it on TMZ and People Magazine and things like that, and you can't find it on API, UPI, Reuters, anything else, it's probably not true.
Yeah. I remember in college that I had a class where one of the things was to teach us how to be discerning consumers of news and information, and we had to subscribe. This is back in the dark ages when newspapers came actually on paper, to the Christian Science Monitor, because that was considered to be international news wise about the most accurate, without a big agenda in one direction or another for media outlets. But yeah, like I was super well informed that semester, and it was exhausting.
Well, and I mean, nowadays, the big news places are owned by corporations. So, but there are some amazing independent news people like Don Lemon. He's not wasting it. He broadcasts twice a day off of TikTok, but it's broadcast. I watch him all the time. Mm-hmm. Joy Reid is independent. Under the Desk News just won an award for independent news. They don't have a board of directors or an agenda behind them that says you can't say this, you can't say that.
Right.
Right. And then I also do international news. I think it's KBH out of South Korea. I do Japan news, BBC, Canadian news. It's like, look in other sources. But people won't. I mean, some people just don't have the sense God gave a walnut shell.
Right.
But
Right. I think it's also there's an inherent problem in the fact that shit news is free and accurate news is often behind a paywall.
sometimes,
Right? Yeah, and it's like,
Well, because accurate news organizations need to pay their reporters.
well, yeah, and I used to be a reporter,
Right.
and I also know that, like in the 80s and 90s, news organizations started cutting staff in favor of profits
There is
because
that too.
ad
Yeah.
rates have never gone down.
Yep.
Well, and when news organizations are beholden to shareholders,
Yep.
that's what happens,
Yeah.
right?
I have
you need
I
to
have a
seek
friend
out-
who's I have a friend who's an anchor with a I'm not going to say which one, but with a major news, international news, and I've talked to them about, why aren't you covering this? And they're like, our owner won't let us.
Mhm.
This isn't going to make it past the editor. It's not going to make it past the legal. It's not, because it has to go through all those channels now.
Jeez.
It's not just the news guy sitting at the desk getting a piece of paper from somebody.
Right. Not Walter Cronkite with his cigarette in his ashtray and his glasses.
Yeah, it's not that anymore.
Yeah. So I want to ask, if I can, you have so many relationships with so many content creators, and some of them are just delightfully silly, like the blonde guy whose name I can never remember, who does those horrible recipes from the 1970s.
Dylan.
Yes, Dylan. Oh my God.
He's Dylan Hollis. Yeah.
Yes, he's hysterical. And the Midwestern mom who
That
does
Midwest
horrible,
Amber. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, just unholy things with gelatin and salmon and it's just wretched. But I'm curious, like, you have this really cool sort of relationship, friendship, working, learning thing with Goddess Mia, right? Like, she's just and I'm curious how that developed, because it's been going on for a while, and it's really cool to watch.
I met Mia back in 2020, and I remember I think the first video I ever saw back in 2020, you could cuss someone out on TikTok. That was not a problem. You can't do that nowadays. And she was mad at someone, and she's Haitian, so her first language is Haitian Creole. And in the video, she was cussing somebody out in Haitian Creole, and I was like, first of all, that's a beautiful language. I remember trying to figure out what she was saying. I was trying to get it through Google Translate and anything. Couldn't do it. And I just started following her. And we started following each other and duetting each other and collaborating. And then we started, texting each other and calling each other on the phone. And it was just like a chosen family. And was just one of those, I've known you for a long time. So,
yeah. But
we just clicked.
Yeah. And like I said before, you model what it is to teach yourself how to deconstruct the white supremacy culture that we swim in, like, because we're like, like you ask a fish, like, how's the water? Well, what's water, right?
Yep.
I'm curious, what are you reading now? Because I know you read.
Right now I'm on a break. I read some really heavy. I just went through some really heavy stuff. I went through Black AF history. Then I read. There was sort of, I can't remember who wrote I was like, I'll read one on Greenwood District, and it was an interesting one on Greenwood. Yeah, that's a good one. The Greenwood one that I read was more about how and why Greenwood was established and how it grew, which I thought was very interesting. Then I read Hood Feminism, excellent book. And then Mia suggested this one. Anytime Mia goes, this is a really hard one, and and I was like, what? I was like, which one? And she said, They Were Her Property. which is the one about
Just got that.
white women who owned enslaved people in the South, and all the shit they did to them. It's like, oh my God. So right now I'm on a break, but I have some in my. I don't know what I have up next. I love Stephen King, so I'm on a Stephen King short story book right now. I was like, I'm gonna take a break, and what do I have?
I can't read this stuff.
Oh, I love Stephen King.
I live in Maine, and I'm just like, like nope.
Yeah.
No, I know he lives like over there, right? I know that. I've met his wife. She's batshit crazy. But yeah, no, I can't. I can't sleep. Nope.
I'm always like, there it is. So what I have up next is Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, People's History of the United States, Between Two Fires, Lakota Woman. I've had a lot of people recommend that one. So there's quite a few I have next.
Well, speaking of heavy ass books, Stacey Patton is coming out with a new book. I think it's available digitally, but the hardback doesn't come out till October, and it's called "How White People Learned to Lynch Black Children."
Jesus.
It's like, I think she called on the spirit of Ida B. Wells. And
good for her.
It's supposed to be the most comprehensive study on the lynching of children, black children, that's ever been done.
Michael, can you put something in the chat so that we can?
Of course. What am I putting in the chat?
Stacey Patton. Okay.
The next Stacey Patton. Patton.
Yeah, I just found her.
Yeah.
How White People Learn. Is that what I'm putting in the chat?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, just so that people can.
Oh, it's called Strung Up: How White People Learned to Lynch Black Children. Yeah, and it's on pre-order right now, and there is a Kindle version.
Yeah.
Okay, I got that one. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Leilani says highly recommend following her on social media. And she has a Patreon as well. I do follow her on many platforms.
Well, and I always say it's important to learn this stuff because I didn't know anything about Black Wall Street until I joined TikTok. So in 2020, I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I never heard about it. But no one wants to talk about it because then they're gonna, there'll be pictures and somebody's great grandpappy is gonna be in the picture lynching someone. It's like, yeah, well, guess what? You did that. So own it and be better and learn from it. It's like, you can't, it's like being an alcoholic. You can't get on the path to recovery until you admit that was a problem. It's like, and so many white people are just like, well, I didn't know. Well, of course you didn't. But that doesn't mean you're not benefiting from white supremacy.
So, Rosie, what put you on your own journey of sort of unlearning for yourself around whiteness and race and some of these other structures that, have so much power in our lives? So I was raised very religious, very conservative, very Republican, and my father was a loudmouth, abusive Archie Bunker. He was a total racist, and I saw him do things when I was a kid that didn't make sense to me, and I was like, why would you be saying that about somebody? And you say something to their face, and then you say something else behind their back, and I'm like, oh, and he wouldn't let us watch All in the Family because he was Archie Bunker. Actually, he was much worse. But when I left school, I was when I left Nebraska, I was 18, dumb as a box. And I will own this for the rest of my life. My first presidential election, I voted for Ronald Reagan. I was 18 years old. It was his second. And within months of that, he cut student financial aid, which I needed because my father had died. My mother had no money. It was like, I better start educating myself. And so by 1990, I was working in social justice in Minneapolis.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but it was education. It was education. and I got a lot of it at the University of Minnesota. I took, okay, I had a lot of questions about Christianity when I was a kid. And I learned very young, very, very quickly that you don't ask questions, or your faith will be questioned. You're going to hell. You're a bad person, and that made no sense to me as a kid, because my mom's a teacher. She said, you analyze a text, you try and find out what it means, you ask questions. I did great in school, and I got in trouble all the time at church.
But not this text.
Not over
Yeah,
here.
not this one. We're just going to say we believe in the talking donkeys and the talking bushes, and that it's okay to kill your children. It's like, no, and that didn't make sense to me. And when I was in second grade, we came home from church one time, and I was like to my mom, I said, I need to ask you a question. She's like, okay. I said, we need to go in your bedroom, and she's like, okay. We got in her bedroom, and I looked at her and I said, lock the door. Because that had a door. I didn't want my dad coming in. Right. And we had a Sunday school lesson about Genesis, which didn't make sense to me. And I said, well, there was Adam and Eve. She's like, yes. I said, then there was Cain and Abel. Yes. Cain killed Abel. Yes. I said, God was very mad at him. And yes. And he was banished to the land of Nod. Yes. I said, that was another city. She said, yes. I said, where'd the other people come from? And she was like, and to her credit, a lot of times my mother would say, I don't know. And we sat and talked about it for a little. I didn't get in trouble. And then we had lunch. It was like, but I had to go behind a locked door as a second grader because I knew I would get in trouble.
Wow.
It wasn't a question of if I would get in trouble for questioning that. Wow. And so in college, I took history of the Holocaust. I took some theology classes. I took history of the Bible, things like that. And it's like, most of the people who come into my lives and, say, oh, you're a bad person. You need to read your Bible more. And I'm like, honey, I've got a Bible right beside me. I'm like, this one, I'm like, that's probably why I'm not. And I said, no. But I will ask them, I said, you need God. Which God? What's your God? Do you know that I would say about 90% of the evangelicals that come into my life do not know the name of the Christian God? And I'll accept several answers. It's like,
most people claim that they're Christians have never read one gospel from beginning to end. So, let alone all four.
Well, yeah, but I could read a medical book. I could read several medical books, but that wouldn't make me a doctor. And there was just a minister on Don Lemon, and he said, people go and spout all this stuff. Yes, they've been to Bible study with their great Aunt Mary, who also has no training in biblical history or theology or anything like that. He goes, so you're spouting this stuff with no actual education behind it. And he goes, maybe that's not a good idea.
Yeah,
and that came from a minister.
I just remember when I was in seminary the first time, and I was taking the New Testament Gospels class, and my professor, he said, if you don't do any other assignment in this class, you must read each gospel from beginning to end and try to do it one gospel in a setting. Read it as a whole story. And we were all kind of like, okay, like whatever. And eventually he said, I was like, I need you all to do this because too many people who identify as Christians have never read a whole gospel. They know pericopes, they know quotables, and because they've never read a whole gospel or more than one, they think they all say this. They think it's one story repeated 4 times. They don't know it's 4 different stories. And coincidentally,
like written for 4 different reasons.
Right. And coincidentally, historically, the newest one always kind of incorporates the ones that came before it, right? Like, magically, until it was, once it was these human people had a child, and then it's like in the beginning, from Mark to John is a really big leap. So
it is.
Yeah.
When I first got to seminary, I went as a Unitarian Universalist. And I had grown up Catholic, so I had zero scriptural knowledge. Like, honest to God, they give you a book, they give you the Bible at 8th grade graduation. They say, here it is, put it on a shelf. We'll tell you what you need to know. Right? Don't go wandering around in there unsupervised. You'll get lost.
It's dangerous.
Certainly don't ask questions unless you're a Jesuit.
Don't ask questions.
But I was in this New Testament, in this Christian scripture class, and I was completely lost. And I had the absolute blessing to have a colleague next to me who is African-American woman who, prior to seminary, had worked for a lawyer. And she's like, he's a sleazy lawyer. She's like, but everybody deserves to have good representation. And he was good at doing that. And no, he took the clients nobody else wanted. I'm like, oh, okay. We won't look too closely at that, but okay. And she said, what we learned was if we were going to court with a case about a particular, like a car accident, right? And if we had all these witness statements, the two that agreed were lying. Because everybody sees something different.
Yes.
If they're standing on 4 separate street corners, they're going to have 4 different things that they're looking at. Everybody has their own things that are important to them that they notice and things that they don't notice. And if there are 2 stories that absolutely match, they're lying because they've arranged that.
They have.
So don't get freaked out when the Gospels don't match, because everybody was standing at different times and places when they were composing these stories. And that was the first time any of that made sense to me.
Well, and the best part is that in the Hebrew scriptures, like, those 3 stories are in the same text. So it's not even like they're different books that you have to compare and contrast. It's like you go from one verse to the next and they don't agree.
Right.
Like,
and Genesis had what, 3, 4 authors? And somebody went and did some sort of like literary macrame project with the damn thing. Like wove it all together. And there was this guy who was a priest who was really, really about authority. And then there was this other guy who was like the bean counter who wanted to have all of the numbers and the measurements. Who cares how many cubits the freaking ark was, right? But there's this one person for whom, like, and it's like any classroom today, right? You've got the one autistic kid that needs to know all the statistics and all the measurements. And you've got the one artsy kid who's like, but what's the big picture, right? And it's like you took a whole classroom full of people and said, okay, write a story. And that's what came out in Genesis. It was a group project.
Yeah.
It did not, like Moses didn't sit down one day with a pen and start writing. That's not how that worked.
No. Well, and my uncle was a Presbyterian minister, and when he went to seminary, he double majored in Greek and ancient Hebrew. Jeez. And it's like, but when I took Jewish studies at the University of Minnesota, there was one class, and the guy was we were talking about Song of Solomon, and he said, well, this rabbinical camp interprets it this way, and this rabbinical camp interprets it this way. And I was like, you can ask questions and argue? And he was like, yes. And they were radically different interpretations.
In fact, it's encouraged.
Yeah, and we had people. They brought in guest lecturers, literally from all over the world, and they flew in this little Hasidic rabbi from Israel to talk about Leviticus. And there was a lot of questions. And finally, this poor little man just sort of shrugs and he goes, "Well, you do the best you can." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, he's a Hasidim. I mean, that's ultra Orthodox. You follow the rules. And he says, if you look at the original text, he said, it'll say, don't eat something. He said, there's no word. It doesn't translate. He said, we have no idea what it says. Or it says, don't do something. And he goes, we don't know what it means. So he said, you do your best. It's like, Oh my God. I'm like, mind blown. And so it's like, because in the Presbyterian church, it would just be like, you're supposed to, take it literally and do it exactly like it says.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
No
exactly
question.
like your particular preacher says.
Yeah, no questions. I was like, okay.
Mm-mm-mm.
But those were some eye-opening classes that I took,
I heard in seminary, because we all sort of went through it, a lot of people will lose their religion in seminary, but not necessarily their faith.
Right.
Because their faith is able to transcend all of the human fuck ups, right?
Mhm.
But the religion, the more you read, the more you realize that this was a creation of incredibly flawed humans.
Because there's no other kind of humans,
We are
Right?
flawed.
right?
We're not a nice species.
Oh my word.
Well,
No,
Totally
we're
not.
we are.
We're the
I
only
like
ones
to
that shit
remind
in our
people.
nest.
I like to remind people, this planet can live without us.
Oh yeah, it'll do fine.
And one day,
Maybe.
it may decide that it has to choose between it and us.
Oh, we are screwed.
Well,
Yeah.
prior to the Ice Age, mammals were very tiny. We were little furry creatures, hiding in dark niches. There was
We were
we were tribbles. There was a species of lizard, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it had a brain case about as big as ours right now. They lived in groups, they lived in families. There was evidence that they took care of their wounded. Then it was like, and they said if the Ice Age hadn't happened, they probably would be the dominant species on Earth.
Hmm.
It was like, but
And
Ice
we
Age happened. They were cold blooded. They all expired because they couldn't regulate their body heat.
Wow. But then if the lizards would be the dominant, we would all have the good sense to take a long nap when it gets cold.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I support that plan. Although,
Yeah.
like, the whole falling out of trees thing is a problem.
Yeah.
In Florida, that like the weather reports, and the chances of falling iguanas. I'm like, no.
I've never been to Florida, and I have no intention of going. No.
Well, definitely don't go when it's going to be under 50 degrees because the lizards.
Yeah.
Lizards fall out of trees. That's just crazy.
Yeah, not something I want to do.
I had a thought, and it was smart.
Oh.
I wonder what it was.
It will return.
Well, I have taken to following informally a number of people who own bearded dragons on social media because they post ridiculous videos about their bearded dragons. And so now I'm just trying to imagine if we all communicated by going like this.
Have you not been to a loud bar? That happens.
It does. Well, and back to the education thing, people, get real upset. First of all, people clutch their pearls and say they're not teaching civics. Well, they're not. They do. They're just not called civics because it's not 1987 anymore. In fact, I looked at the course offerings at my own high school, and they have a lot more than they did when I went there. But you have to understand that people are like, well, they don't teach the real history in school. It's like, okay, first of all, you can't teach that in grade school because we have a bloody genocidal history in this country. It was not pilgrims sitting down with nice hats with indigenous people and having Thanksgiving. It was a massacre. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. But so if you try and teach that in grade school, the teacher has a very good chance of getting fired. I heard a couple teachers, both of them were fifth grade teachers. One taught a unit on Emmett Till. And she could teach it up to a point and couldn't go beyond, because then she probably would lose her job. And another teacher taught a unit about Christopher Columbus. And it was brilliant because it was called Christopher Columbus, Hero or Villain. She used his own diaries.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, he
Let's make it really
think,
clear.
he didn't think anything he did was wrong. It was manifest destiny. If I see it, I'm a white man, I can take it. It's like, oh, good Lord. And at the end of the unit, the kids got to vote if he was a hero or a villain. And I keep telling the MAGAs, you are not going to be prepared for the alphas. And they're going to start voting soon. 100% of the fifth graders voted he was a villain.
Yeah, my kiddo's in 6th grade and did a project on, like, what her writing teacher assigned her all these videos to watch.
Mhm.
Christopher Columbus with different perspectives, including indigenous people's perspectives, and like she had to come up with her opinion on like whether he actually the question was, should we celebrate Columbus Day?
No.
Because in New York, Columbus Day is still the official state holiday. I live in New York, and
which is weird. New York, really?
Well, it was made that to appease Italian Americans.
Oh, right. Sorry, wasn't thinking. Right.
He never even stepped foot on the contiguous United States.
Yeah.
But the question was, should we celebrate Columbus Day?
No.
And they had, my kiddo came to me for advice, so she read a pretty good essay on that. I'm like, well, watch the videos, learn what he did. Like, did he treat people well? Right?
Like, he was so awful. The Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, was like, dude, that's just no.
I'm like, your family is Italian. Should we feel proud that he came from the same place as we did? Like,
no, I'm part Italian too, and I'm more proud of olive oil.
Yeah, like
that brings joy to
the Popeye character or the actual oil.
No, I'm not proud of some.
Both the Popeye character and the actual oil. Yes.
Yeah, the actual oil.
Yeah.
At least that gets put to good use.
It does.
It brings joy.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh
no, I mean, but she had questions because this was the first time as a 6th grader that she had been exposed to like a deeper history, and she had to come up with an opinion and justify it based on the things that she learned.
And I think kids have a great capacity to understand that. And I mean, there may be a subject or something that isn't being taught in school. Well, the parent is the biggest teacher in a child's life. If your school doesn't offer cursive, go to Walmart and buy a cursive book. They cost $1. I got one. I was trying to improve my handwriting. But I always use the example of Corrie ten Boom wrote a book called The Hiding Place. And I believe it came out in 1974, 1975. And then there was going to be, the movie came out, and our church was going to go see it. And my mom was like, okay. So she got the book. She read to us every night. And we read, I think I was 9. And she read The Hiding Place to us. That was my first introduction to the Holocaust. But I was sitting there with my mom and my brother, and we were reading it so we could ask questions. And then we went and saw the movie, and that's part of education. They weren't going to offer studies in the Holocaust in 4th grade at my grade school, but my mother could.
Well, to be fair, I grew up in Brooklyn, so we actually did get those lessons in elementary school, because a third of our classes were Jewish.
Well, there's actually quite a large Jewish population in Minneapolis and in Omaha, but they still weren't going to offer it in grade school, especially not in the 70s. I was like,
Caerhl, Rosie, were you in Minneapolis in 2001 and 2 and 3 in there?
Yes.
So was I.
I left Minneapolis in 2012.
I volunteered at Pride the year I was there. Oh my goodness.
Pride is huge.
It's huge. Minneapolis Pride is generally
gigantic
for 3rd largest with like Atlanta. Because like there's New York and there's San Francisco, and 3rd generally goes between like Atlanta, Minneapolis, one of the other big places that you're kind of surprised. has
Yeah.
that big of a pride. Yeah.
I love figuring out that someone that I've come to know and love and respect was in the same space as me, like a bazillion
Yeah,
years ago.
it's a bit, I mean, the festival and the parade are just massive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I went from being the co-chair of Southern Maine Pride to we moved out to Faribault,
Mhm.
and volunteered at Twin Cities Pride, and I was just like you just dropped a country mouse in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and I was just sort of like, what is this? And why are there sirens? Oh, tornado watch. What?
Well, and I'll tell you something about Minneapolis Pride. So I started going probably in the late 80s. And I know it was sometime in the 90s. And I was with a group of friends, and we happened to be standing by the main stage, so we could actually hear who was being announced, which I didn't usually do. And there were always protesters at Pride, especially back in the 80s and 90s.
Sure. Yep.
And there's this group marching down the street, and it's like, who is that? They had a big sign, and whoever was announcing, and I believe it was one of the Unitarian churches, and it was like the Unitarian Universalist Church. There was an audible gasp among the people who were watching, because the churches were always there protesting us.
Mm.
And it was like, that was the first time I ever saw a church march in Pride, and it was like, oh my God. And now there's tons of them that come. Almost like if you didn't go to Pride, you're not very interesting. But it was like, you're kidding.
Mm.
You know, because we had come through the AIDS crisis where churches wouldn't they wouldn't do your funeral. You couldn't go to, there were doctors that wouldn't take you. You'd go to the hospital and nobody take care of you. It's like, it was, I mean, and it's sad that we still have to do this, but when my friend Bill passed away, it was unexpected, and he and his partner was devastated, of course. And I was like, well, we need somebody to do the funeral. And I called a friend of mine in southern Minnesota. She lived down near Mankato, who's a minister. And I said, I kind of like doing this. And I actually said to her, would you do a gay funeral? And I don't think a lot of times the cis-het people understand that I have called doctor's offices and said, am I welcome there? And, to think that you wouldn't have somebody, and I was fully prepared for her to say, no, I won't do a gay funeral. But she did.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but that relationship with the church has changed a lot, I think.
Yeah. The first church I ever saw at a Pride March was in Portland, Maine, and it was the Friends, the Quakers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they tend to be ahead of UUs on almost everything, but they're just very quiet about it. We come in and make all the noise.
Yes.
Like, we are the boomers. We are like, look, we discovered this. We invented it. No, we didn't.
I like to think we're like Quakers who don't know how to shut up.
Caerhl, Rosie, I'm sorry. I keep getting your name.
No, that's fine. You can call me whatever you want. I don't really care.
I'm curious, after what happened recently was it Kansas or Oklahoma about trans laws? Nebraska?
Yeah.
Kansas?
With
Kansas?
The driver's license?
Yeah, and the whole...
That was Kansas.
I'm wondering, how are things where you are in Nebraska? Because that's not known as a hotbed of political progressivism right there.
No, anything stupid that another state does, like Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, our governor wants to do it immediately. Our governor, I cannot stand him. Pillen, he looks like a moldy pack of dollar store bologna that someone left out in the sun for too long. And we have the problem here where we have had ballot initiatives that we worked really hard to get on.
Right.
And then we send it to legislatures, they're supposed to enact them, and they won't.
Right. You guys passed cannabis, right?
Yep. We still don't have it. Because they changed the amount from 5 ounces to 5 grams. It was like, what?
What?
Huh?
What can you do with
And
5
then he
grams of
literally
cannabis?
just we voted against giving money for public schools to private schools for vouchers. He just gave $3.5 million to the private schools. And he
Wow.
also gave $2.5 million to his girlfriend on a no bid contract for her LLC, which is consulting.
We
He's
know
married, by the way.
Well, of course.
Yeah, no. Nebraska is, I will tell you, is just when you think you have like the Midwest figured out, there's Nebraska. We are very weird. First of all, we're the only state that has a unicameral. We don't have Congress and Senate. We have legislators. And yes, if you look it up, the state capitol building in Nebraska is called the penis of the prairie for good reason. You can pause and look it up. And we are one of 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, can split their electoral votes.
Correct.
And so I'm in District 2, which started turning purple in the 90s and is solidly blue now. And we voted for Kamala, which they cannot stand. They tried, I think it was 5 times to overturn that at the legislature, including once at like midnight, and it didn't work. They can't stand that we would send one
when they're
electoral vote.
sneaking votes at midnight, that it's something really
Yeah.
like.
They want it winner take all, and it's like, no.
Wow. It totally does say Nebraska State Capitol building is informally known as the penis of the prairie.
I have been to the state capitol building in Lincoln, and I can assure you that there is reason.
Mhm.
I've been to the state capitol in Minneapolis.
That's a beautiful Capitol building.
It is. It is.
And I miss Minnesota. I will tell you, that's one thing I miss Minnesota politics, because it's like I worked in both states on them, and it's so frustrating here because it literally took us years to get the medicinal cannabis on the ballot.
Wow.
And it was spearheaded by a man whose son was born, all appearances, normal kid, and started having seizures.
Right.
And
I remember reading
now,
that story. Yeah.
and now is severely brain damaged because he's one of those people that just no medicine really works on him very well. And it's like, so, and they'll say, well, we don't know the long-term effects of cannabis. Well, we know the long-term
we
effects
do.
of seizures. Well, we know the long-term effect of seizures, which is brain damage and death.
Yeah.
We also know the long-term effects of cannabis.
Right.
Because people have been using it safely for hundreds of years.
But we allow alcohol, we allow tobacco, we allow opiates.
That's right.
It's like,
that's right. We also know the long-term effects of alcohol, and none of them are good. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
We do.
We also know the long-term pack of assault weapons on schools and mass places. But we ain't did anything about that. So
no. We send kids to school now with bulletproof backpack shields.
Well, and make them do active shooter drills.
I've done those. And every school in Omaha now, I think that, oh my gosh, when did that happen? It was before my mom passed away. So it would have been probably 2015. Every school in Omaha, including the grade schools, have military grade tourniquets.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And you do. I mean, I will say, going
you
to
want to
work
be
in a
glad
grade,
that they have those, but they shouldn't need them.
no, we shouldn't be spending money on that. No, it should be spending money on things like social studies books. They replaced the carpeting in that school, I think 2 years ago. That carpeting was installed when I graduated from high school in 1984. Ooh. The amazing petri dish of germs in that carpeting probably, oh my God. Considering what little kids in grade school do, oh my God, I can't even imagine. The social studies books didn't even have 9/11 in them because they were so old. Everyone's like, oh, all you need is this for the school, like with bulletproof doors. It's like, oh my God. I counted the doors in our one grade school. There's 17 doors. That school was built in the 1800s. None of those doors are standard. And then we have windows at ground level. It's like, we don't have the money to fix our boiler. And you think we're going to get bulletproof doors. You are. And it's just like.
Well, on this lovely note, we have come to the top of the hour.
Bulletproof door.
You have wasted another perfectly good hour. Click and clack.
It has been a pleasure and an honor to spend an hour with you, Rosie.
Thank you.
The
Thank you
cats
so much
did not show themselves while you were here. One of them showed themselves before we were on the air, so I did get to see one of them.
Yeah, I don't know where he went. They're boycotting me.
But thank you again for this lovely conversation. We hope that you enjoy many more pagan services at the Second Unitarian Universalist
Yes.
Church of Omaha, and we will be back next week.
All right.
Thanks
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank
Have a
you
good
so
week.
much.
Thanks,
All right.
Rosie.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to everyone who gives generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible.
Visit clfuu.org/give to make a contribution.
We hope you will join us next week for another episode of the Voices of Unitarian